it's Sexy First Friday, and we are here today to do our last of the Type and Sexuality series. Today we are doing Enneagram Type 1, and we have a wonderful special guest, Micky, that's going to be joining us, who is a social one. And so we are looking forward to talking more about ones today and how they show up within the sexuality world. Just sitting here waiting for Sam and for Micky to join. Looks like Micky has joined, and so I'm going to see if I can get her to request to have her join us. Here, let's see here. And then we'll just kind of wait for Sam to join us as well. And there is Sam, and let me just see if we can get her in here too with us. Hopefully no technological difficulties today. So hopefully we got Micky in. I'm accepting Sam. Yay! It worked on the first try, 2 months in a row. I can't believe it. Welcome. I am really glad to have you both here today. This is actually the last of our series on type and sexuality. I can't believe we've gotten through all 9 types and we're wrapping up with 1. We went the opposite way. So typically we go from 1 to 9, and we decided to do from 9 to 1. So our ones were going last today. We'll just kind of go through it and introduce ourselves a little bit again. I know many of you know who Sam and I are, but we'll introduce ourselves and then we'll have Micky introduce herself. So hi, my name is Lyndsey. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist, as well as a certified sex therapist and an IA accredited professional out of Minneapolis, Minnesota, where I have a practice where I specialize in relationships and sexuality. I am Enneagram Type 9, who has social in the first position and the sexual instinct in the last position, which is always good to know as well. How about you go ahead and introduce yourself, Sam?
Hi, hopefully you guys know us by now, but if you're new, I'm Sam E Greenberg. I'm a sexuality researcher primarily, and I'm also an Enneagram coach specializing in sexuality, intimacy, and relationships. And I studied the Enneagram with the narrative Enneagram. So we are especially excited to have Micky Scottbey Jones here today as our Type 1 guest. Not only because we're super excited to have her specifically, which we are, but also because we had a very hard time finding Type 1 guests. And Micky answered the call and saved us with her willingness to show up here and talk about herself and her sexuality. We're so grateful. Micky, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Micky Scottbey Jones, and I'm a Type 1, what I call a navigating one. I have been trained in several different Enneagram schools, and I'm certified by the School of Conscious Living, the Narrative Enneagram, and the Awareness to Action Enneagram. And I'm also an IEA accredited professional, and also I'm on the IEA board, global board, and part of the events committee, and I'm here in an unofficial capacity. Just let me say that for sure. And I am a coach and a facilitator, a writer and speaker, and primarily support folks in the social sector, both using the Enneagram and a variety of other modalities and things that I've learned. But most groups have me come in and work with them, both coaching and teaching on the Enneagram. So that's what I do.
We're so happy to have you. I forgot to say my type. I'm a Type 5 with a sexual instinct dominant. So why don't we dive into about Type 1? So as usual with this type series, I'll talk about Type 1s in the research, and Lyndsey will talk about Type 1s in the therapy practice. But really, Micky, we consider you to be the expert, and we are not the experts. You're the expert on your own experience. So we're excited to hear what you think and what sexuality is like for you. Lyndsey, do you want to go first?
Yeah, definitely. I think what was interesting too is we haven't had a whole lot of social dominance agree to come on either. So not only are you a 1, but you are a social dominant, which makes sense, right? When we think we're navigating navigating types where it's like we do care more about sort of how we are perceived and seen. And so that's awesome as well. As a social dominant myself, I always want more social dominance to show up. So that is great to have you. We've only had one other social dominant, which was our four. So that's interesting as well. So ones in the therapy office, I'll talk a little bit about sort of how they show up in the therapy office. Typically, more often than not, how they kind of come into therapy is a partner is bringing them into therapy complaining of sort of not enough sex happening or kind of lower desire issues or concerns. Though one of the things I want to mention about desire is one of the things that we have really learned, and especially in my therapy practice as a sex therapist, is oftentimes it's actually not desire issues that are happening or occurring. What's actually happening is ones in particular, and our self-preservers, as we've talked about before, will have a little bit more difficulty moving through context. So things have to be kind of just right for sex to happen. It'll be a little bit different with our sexual instinct dominance, though what I do find really interesting about social ones when I have them in my office is there is a little bit of like, and I think we actually got a question about this, but just this like, you know, sex should be happening at a certain cadence, and if it isn't happening at that certain cadence, being worried that the couple is not connected or close. Or so it's almost like, you know, we've talked about social dominance before, is almost like they're more willing to do sort of like what we'll call like more like maybe service sex, or like have sex to make sure that the connection is happening versus it actually being about their own desire or want to be sexual. And this is very true as well, sort of with my social ones that I've had in therapy. One of the really interesting things too that I often find about ones is they tend to have very sensitive bodies. So like how you touch them matters, you know, and part of that might be as we think about a little bit, you know, maybe a little bit more rigidity in the body, maybe a little bit more holding the body, and that, you know, because we're maybe holding the body more tensely, you know, how we touch really does matter. And a lot of my ones have a really sensitivity to how you touch them. And so, you know, things are, you know, kind of wanting touch to be just right, not too firm, not too soft, kind of that just right, somewhere in the middle. And sometimes some of my ones, depending on sort of the, you know, their experience and the messages around sexuality, they don't know how to voice this. They can struggle a little bit with like voicing that kind of like how you touch me matters. And a lot of that I see comes from cultural background, religious messages, cultural messages that you get around sexuality. And our ones are going to be more influenced more often than not, sort of around whatever messaging they got kind of growing up around sexuality, like what the right and the wrong way is to sort of show up and be sexually. And they do tend to, like the complaints I sometimes get from partners with ones is being criticized, you're not doing it just quite right, or kind of a lot of the things that we maybe anticipate or expect, you know, from sort of how ones can show up in the world sometimes, especially when those more fixated states. And so sometimes partners can be like apprehensive, or I'm not going to do this right, or my partner's going to be frustrated with me, sort of like around those types of dynamics as well. And so those are some of the things that I see sort of with my ones in therapy. Though you will see sexual ones don't typically have as much difficulty pushing through desire. I'm just thinking of like a sexual 3 and sexual 1 couple in my office. Like they didn't come in because sexuality was an issue or concern. They came in for other issues and concerns. And so you're not going to see maybe that being the primary issue bringing them in. But because I'm a sex therapist, we often do just talk about sex anyway, because I think sex is such an essential part of who we are. And so no matter who comes into my office, I'm going to ask you about your sex life as well. So that's a little bit about kind of ones in the therapy room. How about you share a little bit about what you see in the research, Sam?
Okay, perfect. And I just say keep an open mind. Ones tend not to like this. And I totally recognize that there can be flaws in data. This is just what came out in the study that I did personally, but I'm really interested to hear like Micky's perspective, what jives with her and what doesn't. So, in the study that I did, ones did rank lowest in very low in sexually explicit materials consumption. You know, that'd be like pornography, erotica, and lower than any other type in like BDSM and kink participation. Um, Low in dyadic sexual desire, meaning low in the desire to actualize sex with a partner. Not to say that ones aren't thinking about sex, but they say like overall, I don't need to have sex all the time compared to other types. They can go longer without sex than any other type comfortably. That's what they're self-reporting. Especially our social and self-pres ones, sexual ones would be less likely to say that. And ones also scored quite low in sensitivity to desire cues. So I talked in the type 5 episode about what that means because type 5s are also very low. What desire cues are literally cues that make us feel desire. So I measured 4 different types of desire cues, romantic cues, explicitly erotic cues. Um, and ones are like, I can do without the cues. Like I don't feel that sparked by any type of desire cues, and 5s also said that. Also, we see one scoring in the middle for sexual assertiveness, still in the bottom half, but really towards the middle. So ones feel comfortable saying, like, I don't like that, I do like this, more than quite a few other types. And ones also score in the middle for pleasing a partner, meaning that pleasing a partner is just as important to them as their own pleasure. So what we're seeing is ones might not feel a need to engage sexually all the time, but when they do, they are okay speaking up for what they like, and communicating their desires to the partner, and they value the desires communicated by the partner to them. What I've heard ones say is that they actually have, a lot of them anyway, have like a rich fantasy life in many cases. So when they hear this like sort of flat profile of themselves in the research, like that doesn't fit me because within myself I have this really alive sexuality. It's just that I have a lot of other things to do, so I might not always need to have the sex, but like I really do have this alive sexuality. So, Micky, I'm really curious how everything Lyndsey shared and I shared jives with your experience, because we know there's way more to type ones than meets the eye or shows up in the data.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting because I do, when I hear people talk about ones and sexuality, I often feel like it's very flat, like it doesn't represent my experience. But also, what I know about myself is that I have changed, I think, matured and grown over the years. So I think that's something to it. Like, I don't think it's just age, right? I think it has something to do with, doing that personal work, and expanding and growing as a person. I know that the through line of my type, and my instinctual bias, that through line is still there. But, my life has changed a lot. Some people who have followed my work, like have heard me talk about being a child bride. I was married for the first time at 19, heavily involved in the kind of evangelical Christian church, very conservative, part of the True Love Waits movement, right? So sex was, the only sex that counted was, P and V sex. The only, everything else was kind of something else. And so, having a lot of shame and pressure about, sexual intercourse. And then now I am a very progressive, queer, pansexual woman in a relationship with a woman. So it's like I am on the very other side of like the sexuality spectrum. I don't have any of those same kind of commitments, even around like what sex needs to look like and that kind of thing. So, I think I personally have changed a lot, which I don't know, where that fits inside of talking about a type 1, like I'm a type 1 who's had a very particular journey. So I also wonder if when I'm hearing the research, I'm going, oh yeah, I see it. And I see my own personal journey, and it's like trying to talk about both things. But some of the things, you shared the research with me in preparation for this, and some of it when I initially saw it, I'm like, no, that's not. And then I talked to my partner about it, thought about it some more. I'm like, yes, I see where it's coming from, and I can understand it, even if maybe it looks slightly different for me. Like even just thinking about the like sexually explicit materials, right? Like for me, I have never been someone who cares to watch porn. I don't, at this point, I have no moral issue with pornography in general. Like, of course, very particular kinds of porn I do, right? Like there are going to be things where I have a moral judgment against certain kinds of porn. I mostly don't engage it, one, because I do want porn to be ethical if I'm going to consume it, and it costs money to consume ethical porn. And it takes extra time and effort, and I just am not going to do it because I don't care about it enough to go search for those things and then pay for it. So the option is just don't do it. I'm just not going to do it. I don't have time. And then I'm very sensitive to visual stimulation, so like audio, like listening, like if you've heard of Quinn or Dipsy, that's enough for me. That's great. You know, I don't really need to see it, you know. And that way, I like, those are audio performers. I know they're getting paid. It's you know, there's an agreement between the person literally making the audio, and they could do a million other things. They can still have a regular job and do this because nobody knows who they are. They're a voice actor, you know? So for me, it is connected to kind of this moral idea I have around how to treat people well, which I think is probably connected to this like desire to be a good person. And so for me, it's still wrapped up in that, even though it's, you know, something sexual.
That That's so fascinating and one like of you to talk about how, important the ethics are,
Yeah.
which of course many people feel that way, but I hear this really strong sense of right and wrong with what you consume that I think is illustrative of the oneness. And you also talked about being really sensitive. In this case, you said to visual stimulation, but like Lyndsey was saying, ones do tend to have a lot of sensitivity in all sexuality matters. We definitely want to talk about subtype, but I was sparked by what you were saying about the evangelical upbringing, because what we find with ones, a lot of us are messed up around religion, shame,
Yeah.
sexuality, but what we found is that ones are the most messed
Yeah.
up, basically, because it goes so deep for you guys is to be told like here's the way to be right, and you just have to do what I say and then you're good, you're pure. And so I'm so amazed and fascinated how far you've come from that till now. And I don't know if we have a lot of time to go into it, but just I'm so interested in how you managed to get so far from that upbringing, because we see a lot of ones in their 30s, 40s, 50s that are still like completely underneath the pressures of that kind of like religious indoctrination.
Yeah, I mean, I think my partner jokes that I'm like, you know, I was the best Christian I could be, so now I'm like, I'm gonna be the best gay, you know, like I'm just gonna go for it. Um, so I'm super into like being this identity now, and I do think there is a evangelicalism that ones, whatever the thing is they're evangelical about. I think that ones can tend towards that. So it makes sense that I would be like that. You know, for me, I still see this through line, right? For me, it's about still being a good person. My idea of what it means to be good, to be right, to be righteous has just changed. And the way I look at it is like a higher law of love versus following rules. Before I was following rules. Do this and you get that, right? Obey these things, you get into heaven. Like it was a very clear, you know, and that's when I kind of went looking for religion as a teenager. That's what I was looking for, is like, what's the right path so I can get on it and, you know, go to heaven and, you know, be on the right side of whatever, right? And then eventually that broke down as I part of it is relationships with people and realizing that I like, oh wait, these people are good people, but they're not this religion. So how does this work? Like the system started to fail. And then I had questions. And so that allowed it to open up for me. And a lot of it was around even how like queer kids were treated within this understanding that I had of God and religion and church. And so then I was able to piece everything back together. So for me, you know, it's not that I don't believe in kind of these principles of like love and relationship and all of those things. And it's because I believe in those things fully that I had to change what I believed. And then the sexuality piece, there were things that I just didn't entertain in my old worldview. And so when that worldview was gone, I was like, oh, interesting. Yeah, I've always, I thought women are pretty, but I just thought everybody thinks women are pretty. Like, objectively, women's bodies are beautiful, right? Everyone thinks that. No, girl, not everybody thinks that. Like, not everyone thinks that breasts are great. Some people are straight. But it just didn't occur to me as an option. And then once it was an option, I was like, oh, great. I'll try everything, and so I've had partners of different genders and sexualities, and it just makes sense to me now that I am able to do that I have attraction. I've always had kind of a attraction. I realized my attraction was more to masculinity, or even like the interplay of gender and that kind of thing, than it is to particularly men. But I had to kind of unpack that and unpeel kind of the layers of just compulsory heteronormativity. Like, I had to do that as I was realizing, and also after leaving a marriage, because I also, is very important for me to be faithful. So in my marriage, it just wasn't a question either. And I was married for 20 years. So, then there was a process of finding myself, doing a lot of the work I think people do in their early 20s, if they're dating around and that kind of thing. I was already married. So I did that in my 30s and 40s, like, figured out, oh, this is who I am.
Great. Thank you so much for sharing all of that. If we have the phrase compulsory heteronormativity happening on this live series, then we're doing pretty well. Okay, let's talk about subtypes. Lyndsey, what do you want to say about ones and subtypes and how that results in different sexual expression with ones?
I think, like, as I was mentioning, that sexual ones can push through that context a little bit more easily and kind of move into the sexual relationship. Self-preservation ones are going to have the most difficulty, and social are going to be kind of in the middle with that. But I think what's interesting is all three tend to have sensitive bodies. I think it's just more of that one quality that is there. But unlike when I was talking about twos last month, there really isn't a gender difference here, with men or women in my office. I mean, women and men the men that are ones also tend to have a little bit more difficulty pushing through context and moving into it and things like that. It was interesting. I was actually meeting with a social one, and when I was hearing Micky speak, like, he was really struggling with sort of like, there's all these fantasies and all these ideas that he has. And a lot of the work that we're actually doing right now is like, he wants to be part of communities that are kind of more into kink and BDSM and roping in these types of things, but then also the messaging that he's gotten around that and fear about the judgments. And so you might get a little bit of that, I think, with social dominance, depending again. And he was brought up in more of like a Catholic, conservative Catholic background, right? And so, like, having this internal like shame around how sex should be, but yet I have all these fantasies and ideas. I think it's just wonderful, like, when I hear Micky, like, her ability to kind of move through that and kind of identify that. I think that's the beautiful thing too, when ones like do their work and they can live more in that gray and determine what is that right or wrong based on what's internal for them in the inside. Like, that's like the huge like learning. And what I do see is that, like, once ones in general can kind of move through that, they're super playful sexually. It's like that 7 just like pops up and they're like super playful. They're super fun. It's like the one place they like let go. They don't need to have the control. They can be more, and like that I've seen that with so many of my ones, and it can almost throw partners off sometimes when they see them sort of rigid in the everyday life aspect of things, or very structured, and then this sort of like playfulness, spontaneity, like letting go when they finally get to sex. So that's like one of the beautiful things. I think see that with all the subtypes as well. But there isn't as much difference sort of with ones around subtype that I might see with, like, for instance, our twos we had last month.
I agree with that. And I'd say sexual ones are the most different. And sexual ones are the most likely to be the type of one where sexuality is like a escape or vacation. Because we've all heard about if you take a one on vacation away from their to-do list, away from their house, there's nothing to clean, then they get, a lot of times really free and really relaxed. So sexual ones are a little more likely to be like that within the container of sexuality itself. Like within sexuality, they can be really free. Whereas social or navigating and self-preservation sometimes can't get there unless you take them out of their environment and away from their to-do list. It just depends. So Micky, we're curious what your experience has been as a navigating or social type one within sexuality. Like, how do you feel your subtype plays in for
Yeah,
you?
yeah. I mean, I almost feel well. I'll put it this way. You all probably are familiar with how Esther Perel talks about like you will have multiple relationships over your lifetime. Sometimes they'll be with the same person, and my poor ex-husband. Because when we met at, I was 18. He's a couple of years older than me. You know, despite it being against the rules, we were sexually active before marriage, and we couldn't keep our hands off each other. We were very, very active, and there was still the cycle of like, try not to have sex, shame, try not to have sex, shame. I mean, just the total cycle. But there was a lot of desire, there was a lot of initiation, like all of those things. And then we got married, nothing from my side. I think the like getting married was like yes, that's when you're supposed to want it, but like all of the responsibilities of running a household. My first baby was born at 23, right? Like the not being able to be pulled out of context. It was very, very difficult for me to access desire and to make myself available because I had so much to do. I felt all of these things that needed to be done. And I didn't have that before, right? Fast forward to now, I do think it's my experience that like I could go long periods of time without. I hear some people talk about sex as a need, as akin to needing to eat food. I don't see sex in that way of like, I will die if I don't have sex. I enjoy, orgasms. I have great orgasms, not a problem. And it's just not the biggest deal in the world. I have very high quality sex, which I know, women who are having sex with women report. I have very, very high quality of sex. But I am not as concerned with frequency. There was, I think, a lot of scorekeeping when I was with a man. There was a lot of that, like, it has been this long. But some of that, I think, was about, am I going to get in trouble? Right? Like, we haven't done it in 3 days. Now the clock is ticking. And I don't have that same experience now. Again, younger, children, the throes of raising children, all of those things. And I've also had that experience of, people meet me at a conference and they think I'm a 7. If y'all saw me I don't know, Sam, if you were in Oakland at the IA conference, if you saw me on the dance floor in Oakland, honey, oh, woo, we had a time. There was a lot of lots of dancing and lots of manners, and we were having a fabulous time. So people experience me away from my responsibilities and do have that experience, that very different experience. I think I am more integrated now in that I am able to let go. There is something in my head that's like, this is good for me. This is recreation. This is fun. I want to connect with my partner in this way. There's thought behind it versus what I imagine some people could have of just like a raw desire or something. There's still kind of this like talking to myself about what it is and why it's important. So I'm going to initiate, or I'm going to do it. Or, it's rarely because it's like, I need this right now. I don't know if that makes sense, but there's this like, I'm not driven by that. It's much more like I'm going to establish this connection with my partner right now because I want to, because it's important to our relationship, because it's enjoyable, because it will bond us, but there's kind of reasoning behind it,
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. I think the being away from your responsibilities and then letting loose, that makes perfect sense as well. I could hear some social navigating coming in there of like, oh, like it would be great to connect in this way and it'll bond us and let's plan it. Um, well, we're running till the end with we haven't even got to questions yet. Lyndsey, did you want to say something about planned spontaneity? I feel like we haven't covered that yet.
Yeah, one of the huge things that I give as homework for my ones and for my sixes for different reasons is what we call planned spontaneity. Ones typically do really well with like if you plan the opportunity for like a romantic sexual connection with the opportunity for sex to happen. So like, putting aside 4 hours on a Saturday morning as your plan to allow that space and that time for that intimacy and connection to happen and occur. And I think that, and a lot of times I do get ones and sevens paired together, right? And so you get this dynamic where it's like the seven wants more spontaneity, the one wants more planning, and that ability to kind of have more of that planning having that planned spontaneity kind of fulfills both of those needs. One of my couples that I had too was just like, on Friday morning, plan in a half hour before you get up and do stuff to snuggle and cuddle your partner. And like what's really interesting with that is like what you'll see is like when the one like let's go, like this is the plan, like there's opportunity for sex and that to happen as well. So that's a huge thing for my ones. For my sixes, it's also helpful, but it's more about because they want to be prepared and to know what to expect than it is about it being part of the plan or part of the structure that's happening or occurring. But that's been a really good, like little quick tip if you're in a relationship with a one, or if you're a 7 and 1, it's a great way to meet both your needs.
Yeah, and what's interesting, my partner is a 7 now. I don't, I've had two other kind of long-term partners that were 4s. So I've kept that 1-7-4 thing going. And I will say too, with the planning, like I would say I sometimes like plan, not now, like again, I'm much more integrated now, so I don't need all the conditions to be right like I did earlier in my life. But I might have a plan. It doesn't necessarily mean I tell my partner I have the plan, but I'm thinking, oh, I would like to do this. I'll probably initiate on Saturday. Like I'm planning with myself, if that makes sense.
Yes,
That
that's a
is
great hack.
that is awesome. That's the one I give sixes most of the time. Prepare for what you want to have sexually, and then it can like, and I'm thinking like a 6 and 4 in particular, where it's like then it's like it can they don't know that's not spontaneous, but it's spontaneous for them. That is a wonderful, wonderful hack. I love it.
That's great advice. Yeah. I'm gonna try to sneak in one question just so we don't ignore the couple questions we have. Someone was asking, how do I help my type 1 get in the mood if I initiate sex spontaneously with the one, they get frustrated with me saying it's not the right time? What would you advise for partners of ones?
Yeah. I mean, I think often for me, it's been because I feel like I have other things I have to do, responsibilities that haven't been met, or maybe I am feeling tense or worried about something, and so I think, people will say like sex starts in the kitchen, right? Like, is there something you could take off their plate that day? Is it even kind of on the planning thing? Like earlier in the day, can you snuggle and hug and be like, I would really love to touch you tonight or whatever, right? Like let them know it's coming so that I can then decide when the day is going to be over. I can decide that I am going to close that computer at 6 o'clock and I'm going to make some time. But if you haven't told me that, and then normally what we do is sit around and watch TV and I've still got my computer open, well, I didn't get a warning. I didn't get to get through my to-do list enough to feel like I could do it, right? So those kinds of things where you both let the person prepare and let them, and if you can, if there are things you can just take off their plate and help with, and not even overall in a relationship, that I think has helped me too, being in a relationship that feels very mutual, feels like we're doing, we're working together. That overall changes things. But those are the two things I would say.
Incidentally, those are both pieces of advice we would give to partners of self-preservation dominance of any type as well, because they tend to have sort of similar barriers to type ones. So that's really lovely advice. I especially love the like you can decide when your day is over and kind of titrate out your to-do list differently if you know it's coming. So giving a heads up, that's really helpful. Um, well, we're pretty much at the end. We're over time already. We had some other questions, but maybe we'll have to ask you over DMs and share your responses because we don't want to keep you too long. Lyndsey, do you want to quickly mention the type workshop that we have coming up, and then we'll close?
Yes, we have a Enneagram type and sexuality workshop coming up on March 13th. We did something similar with instincts last in the fall. And so the pre-sale for that actually ends today. So if it's something that you're interested in, it's on a Thursday. Thursday is the 13th. It will be from 12 p.m. CST to 2 p.m. CST. It is recorded. Because we know some people can't make it during the day, and so if you can't make it live, it will be recorded and you can kind of watch it at your own convenience. We are super excited. On the other note of that, we are actually having an in-person training in July. I am from Minneapolis, and the IAA conference happens to be in Minneapolis, and so Sam and I, kind of spur of the moment, which is not us at all, rented a space at the Center for Performing Arts, and we're going to be doing a full-day workshop on Enneagram and sexuality. So if you're coming to the IA conference and you want to stay through Monday, you can join us in person as well for that. And we are super excited to actually be able to do something in person because, as you know, Sam is in New Mexico and I'm in Minneapolis, and so a lot of things that we do tend to have to be, virtually. And so having the opportunity to be in person is super exciting for us. And then I just want to say thank you so much for joining us, Micky. I just love everything that you shared. I think that you showed just like not only some of the struggles that ones have, but also like those growth points and like how we can move through and decide for ourselves sort of like what is the right and wrong for us versus sort of like messages we may get from family or society or from church. And I think that that's just beautiful, like how you came to that yourself and kind of can like own that identity and kind of be in that. And that's like what we hope for everybody, and especially difficult for ones to do. So it was really beautiful to hear that and to see how you were able to kind of like, fully embody sort of like who you are as a one and like what your righteous path or what the right path is for you. I can't believe how quick today went. Go ahead, Sam.
Is there anything you wanted to share or promote, or do you want to tell people how to find you and your work?
I mean, of course, people can find me here. My website is mickyscottbeyjones.com, my name. I'm the only Micky Scottbey Jones that exists, so it's easy to find me. And I think I would just encourage people to let the ones in their lives surprise them, especially if that is your romantic partner or partners. We can be very fun and kinky and open and, spontaneous. We can be all of those things, given the right conditions and the right partner who's willing to let us explore and open us up to those things. And so, yeah, just expect the unexpected with us sometimes because it can happen.
And we hope to see you on the dance floor in Minnesota in July, Micky.
Absolutely.
Thank you so, so much for being here.
Bye,
Thank
guys.
you.
Bye.
Take care. See you next month.